Tonight, part 4 of the Here I Am series. And the big question for tonight for us is, what if I'll never be the hero? So, what if I will never be the hero? Tonight we're going to look at another way how you can still really make a difference. So here's the Here I Am series. And the ones that are in white boxes have already been done. Blue is what we're doing tonight. I bet you don't recognize which Bible story this is about. And as you can see, there's still at least 3 left to go beyond this. So last week, a little bit similar, we did one day in the life of a nobody, where we looked at Ananias. He only shows up in the Bible for one day of his life only, the day the Lord sends him to be the first Christian to interact with Paul after the road to Damascus experience. And the takeaway from that was, he said, "Here I am," when the Lord called, and perhaps we ourselves will never know the one moment we had the choice to do something of internal consequence and the outcome of that choice. So we really need to be listening. And the 3 examples of the nobodies was Ananias, he's not a nobody, but he's not a major figure in the book of Acts. And Surfer Dude, the guy there, we're keeping this anonymous. And a guy named Dr. Boris Cornfield, who we have no photos of or anything. But on the night that he was murdered, the last words he ever spoke was telling his story of how he became a Christian in the Siberian labor camps to Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who had a huge impact. So the point is that even if you're a nobody who never gets any recognition, like Surfer Dude here, what did he do? He led my brother to the Lord, and then as a result, the rest of us met the Lord and all became Christians, and now the extended family, of which this is about half, are nearly all committed Christians. So even though we may seem like we're a nobody, the impact we can have is really significant. So here's the verse, the key verse for tonight, and it's also the verse that has the "Here I Am" in it. And there's something that's pretty different about this one than the other ones we've done so far. But his armor bearer said to him, "Do all that is in your heart, turn yourself, and here I am with you, according to your desire." So the thing that's really different about this one is God is not the one who's calling. But still, this guy is saying, "Here I am." And the important thing that he's saying is, "I am with you." So let's get the backstory to this. We're talking 3,000 years ago, after the late Bronze Age collapse, where the children of Israel went into the Promised Land, and then shortly after that, the Philistines arrived. And we went into a lot of detail in this, didn't we, earlier this year, Wade? So I'm going to go fast. But the thing about the Philistines is that they were a much more advanced civilization. They had a better organized government. They had ironworking. They had the equivalent of tanks for that day. They had chariots. And the Israelites had none of that stuff. They didn't have any iron working armor, basically. Because in a similar situation to today, the Philistines put the Israelites under sanctions. So anyway, back to the key verse. His armor bearer said to him. So who is this him that we're talking about? Well, again, we spent a lot of time on this earlier. It was supposed to be a 1-part thing. It ended up being 5 parts about a tragic king. And the tragic king is King Saul, who was the son of a mighty man of valor and a more handsome person and taller than anybody else, right? And so who is the guy that is the him that the armor bearer is helping? Well, it's Johnathan, his son, right? So here's this guy, Johnathan, his son. He's the son of King Saul. He's the grandson of the mighty man of valor. And, It reminds us of some popular American political figures, right? Senators' sons. You may not have known this, but Bush 41, he was a senator's son. And Warren Buffett, who for multiple years was the richest man in the world, well, he was the son of a congressman and successful businessman. So anyway, that brings to mind something from the Vietnam War era. And if Mark was here, he'd probably know what the secret weapon of a Huey helicopter was, right? And there it is. If you look carefully, it's got this toggle switch here. And as you're taking off, just like in the movies, immediately you'd hear Creedence Clearwater.
It ain't me, I ain't no senator son.
So unlike these guys, and this is something we can relate to, we're not like this guy Johnathan, are we? We ain't no senator's son. So, but this guy Johnathan, he was one of those guys. So let's go through the story. First thing that happens is Johnathan smote the garrison of the Philistines that was in Geba. And that's an interesting little thing, but when they say garrison in modern parlance, they're saying the military base. Now look at where Geba is. See that? The Philistines are down there on the coast. And yet they have a military base in Geba. And that's just business as usual. I'll pass through this next slide of U.S. military bases without comment. But how do you think the Philistines thought that turned out? They probably called that, man, these barbarian Israelites did a terrorist attack on us, right? So let's see what happened after that. You're probably familiar with this. Did I go through this with the... I mean, this is a minor Bible story, but it's got a message for us. And it had the phrase, "Here I am" in it. So it's part of the series. So, then Saul blew the trumpet throughout the land and said, "Let the Hebrews hear." And all Israel heard the news that Saul had smitten the garrison of the Philistines. By the way, was it Saul who did that? But it was Saul's son, right? Anyway, and also that Israel had become odious to the Philistines. The people were summoned to Saul at Gilgal. Now the Philistines assembled to fight with Israel 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen, and people like the sand which is on the seashore in abundance. And they came and camped at Michmash. And when the men of Israel saw that they were in a strait, how would you put that in modern parlance?
Tight spot.
Yeah, even stronger than that. Mark, you missed the joke that was there just for you.
Oh?
Yeah, I'll play it for you later. When the men of Israel saw that they were in a strait, I mean, we don't use this language in church, but when they saw that they were about their beep kicked, they were about to get their beep kicked, then the people hid themselves in caves, in thickets, in cliffs, in cellars, and in pits. And some of the Hebrews crossed over the Jordan into the land of Gad and Gilead. What would you say they were doing?
They're running away.
Yeah.
Now, how many of you know which movie that's from?
I think so.
Monty Python and the Search for the Holy Grail. One of the greats of all time. Anyway, meanwhile, Saul was staying at the outskirts of Gibeah, pretty close by, under the pomegranate tree, which is in Migron. And the people who were with him were about 600. So let's compare the situations here. Well, first of all, he might even be hiding, mightn't he? I don't know. But he's under a pomegranate tree, and they have a military base. What's he got for his military base? A pomegranate tree. That's not a secret weapon. Now the Philistines, he had 600 men. The Philistines had 30,000 chariots. So it's a really bad situation. And let's see what happened. Johnathan said to the young man who was carrying his armor, "Come, let us cross over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. Perhaps the Lord will work with us, for the Lord is not restrained to save by many or by few." So do you get a feel for what kind of guy this guy Johnathan is? He's courageous. He's a little out of control too, isn't he? I mean, first of all, he attacked the garrison of the Philistines, the military base of the Philistines, with all of his troops with him. Now it's him and his armor bearer. So you could say he's full of faith, and you could say that, courage is actually a really important virtue. And here's a couple of passages that relate to Joshua going into the promised land, where the last words of Moses to Joshua are, "Be strong and courageous. You shall give the people possession of the land. Only be strong and very courageous." And then Moses, in his very last words, is recorded in the book of Deuteronomy, to Joshua, says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not fear, be afraid, or tremble at them. For the Lord your God is the one who goes with you. He will not fail you or forsake you." You probably heard that little promise from the Old Testament. He will not leave you or forsake you, right? That's one of the things that get quoted all the time, right? But how often do you hear that right before that is, you've got to be strong and courageous because you're about to go into a situation where you're deeply outnumbered, right? Which is actually the reason why we need to depend that the Lord is with us and that he won't fail us or forsake us, because he's putting us in an uncomfortable, dangerous spot sometimes, right? Okay? And then the verse about courage that came to mind to me is from the book of Revelation, where it says, "They overcame him," the dragon, Satan, "by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of the testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death." So this guy Johnathan is right up there, right? And it doesn't say, "I'm absolutely sure God has promised me that he's going to work for us," does it? It says, "Perhaps the Lord will work for us." Okay, well, anyway, this also, some of us in this room may say, "I'm so old, I don't need to be courageous anymore." Right? But, Polycarp, when he was brought into the arena to be martyred, right? He said, "I'm not going to turn away from Christ. I've served him 86 years. He was a disciple of John. If he'd already served Christ 86 years, how old was he? Maybe even older than the oldest one who's in the room right now.
That's for sure.
Maybe. And yet, the voice came from heaven to him saying, "Be strong." While he's in the arena, "Be strong, Polycarp, and play the man." So, it's actually a very courageous thing, isn't it? Now, at this point, you know who you are as a person, right? And you probably know that you're probably never going to be that guy like Johnathan. Well, we've got a Johnathan here, but not that Johnathan, this Johnathan, right? And what if you'll never be that guy? Well, that's where the "here I am" and the armor bearer comes in, right? His armor bearer said to him, "Do all that is in your heart, turn yourself, and here I am with you according to your desire." So that's kind of He's using like regular everyday language from 3,000 years ago. And this Bible translation is very literal. What happens if we try to paraphrase this into the type of thing we'd hear nowadays? The armor bearer had said to him, "Do all that is on your heart." Well, you heard people say, "So what's on your heart today?" Do all that is on your heart. Go for it. Right? I'm with you all the way. That's what the armor bearer was saying, wasn't it? And both of them are taking a really big chance, right? Yet he says, I'm with you. So what happens? Then Johnathan reveals the plan. Johnathan said, "Behold, we will cross over to the men and reveal ourselves to them. If they say to us, 'Wait until we come to you,' then we will stand in our place and not go up to them. But if they say, 'Come up to us,' then we will go up, for the Lord has given them into our hands, and this shall be a sign to us." So if it works out either way, what's going to happen? There's going to be a fight, right? When both, this is 1 Samuel 13 and 14. When both of them revealed themselves to the garrison of the Philistines said, "Behold, the Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they have hidden themselves." Now, what are they doing? What's their attitude?
They're taunting.
Gonna mock him.
They're mocking them. They're laughing at them. Which brings to mind my favorite quote of the 20th century from Mahatma Gandhi. First they ignore you. And he's got 600 guys down. Who cares about them? We got our giant army. Then they ridicule you. Right? How many of you know the end of the quote? You'll find out. Okay? So the men of the garrison hailed Johnathan, his armor bearer, and said, "Come up, and we will tell you something." Are they still like joking around? And Johnathan said to his armor bearer, "Come up after me, for the Lord has given them into the hands of Israel." Then Johnathan climbed up on his hands and feet, see, that's in the picture, and his armor bearer behind them, and they fell before Johnathan, and his armor bearer put some to death after him. That first slaughter which Johnathan and his armor bearer made was about 20 men within half a furrow in an acre of land. Well, I was pretty puzzled by this. 20 men within about half a furrow in an acre of land. And I investigated this. And you know what it means? He mowed them down like plowing one row in a small field. Right? It's an acre of land, and it's half of one furrow. Just one row. Mowed them down. Okay. So back to the Gandhi quote. First they ignore you, then they ridicule you, then they fight you. Now do you know the end of the quote? Okay. And there was a trembling in the camp, and in the field, and among all the people. Even the garrison and the raiders trembled, and the earth quaked, so it became a great trembling, like the movie I watched last week. Do you recognize that?
The original.
Panic breaks loose, right? Meanwhile, back with Saul, now Saul's watchmen in Gibeah, looked, and behold, the multitude melted away, and they went here and there. And Saul said to the people who were with him, "Number now and see who has gone for us." Is he leaping into action?
No.
He's dithering about. Meanwhile, it's Johnathan and his armor bearer against that giant army,
30,000 men.
all alone.
What were they thinking?
But what about these other guys? What about the guys who went and hid themselves? Well, let's see what happens. Then Saul and all the people who were with him rallied and came to the battle. And behold, every man's sword was against his fellow. Complete pandemonium is breaking out. And even these Philistines who formerly were united, now that things are going bad, they're attacking each other. I could make a political comment right now, but I won't. Now the Hebrews who were with the Philistines previously, who went up with them all around the camp, Hebrews joined sides with the Philistines. Did you see that?
Yes.
Hebrews who were with the Philistines, even they also turned to be with the Israelites who were with Saul and Johnathan. When all the men who had hidden themselves in the hill country heard that the Philistines had fled, even they pursued them closely in battle. All these guys came out. Now, Jonathan Gladwell has this book called The Tipping Point, which is sort of a book about crowd psychology, which I haven't read, but here's the key quote. The tipping point is that magic moment when an idea, trend, or social behavior crosses a threshold, tips, and spreads like wildfire. And that's what happened here. It went from these Philistines are going to kick to we're losing. And all the psychology completely tips, right? And the conclusion of the story is, so the Lord delivered Israel that day. Now you get to see the end of the Gandhi quote. First they ignore you, then they ridicule you, then they fight you, then you win. I love that quote. Okay. Perhaps the Lord will work with it for us. The Lord is not restrained to save by many or by few. So as you look deep into yourself, do you think you'll ever be that person? That person who has that kind of boldness and courage and faith? So what if you never will be that guy? That guy who's like filled with boldness and he's got this vision and he knows what to do and he goes out and does it whether he has permission or not. Well, he's not the only guy in the story, is he? There's also the armor bearer who's with him. Do all that is on your heart. Go for it. I am with you all the way. I am with you all the way. Can you perhaps be that guy? The guy who's the early supporter? The guy who's there with the guy who's got the boldness and the vision? By the way, when the Lord sent them out, he sent them out 2 by 2, right? After this, the Lord appointed 70 others and sent them out in pairs. It probably wouldn't have worked out if it wasn't for that armor bearer. And there are people who the Lord is calling to do something bold and they're ready to do it, but they're the superhero, they need their sidekick, right?
Somebody's got their back.
If they're Batman, they need Boy Robin, right? Okay, so that's the message for tonight. What if you will never be the hero? Tonight we looked at how you can still really make a difference.